Thank you. When I came here this morning, I had Hans take a picture of me in front of this wonderful slogan, which is behind us, behind this screen, where it says, Silnie, Smielie, Lovkie. So that's very good slogans, and I can confirm that the organizers of this event have made their proof of these three wonderful characteristics. So strong and courageous or brave, and at the same time skillful. Actually, Lovki means many more things than just skillful, because it's the opposite of clumsy. So creating all this infrastructure from scratch is very admirable. I'm now complementing Hans's presentation a little bit, in the sense that I try to also predict the future a little bit, or maybe not at least go too much into the past, because I've done that on previous occasions. Maybe I just go a little bit to the past in an introductory remark that I started at the European Commission in 1994, when my country, Finland, decided to join, or actually that was already 1 year before. That was, yes, I joined 1 year before the act of joining, the accession of Finland, in the preparation phase. And part of the preparation was to translate legislation, the existing legislation of the European Union, which back then in 1994 was about 60,000 pages of legislation. And I was part of a team of 15 people. We did not translate. We were supposed to revise the translation. So the 15 people, we represented different areas, different professions, and I was the engineer in the group. So I ended up reading very interesting text, for example, animal health certificates, because there was no veterinarian in the group, so I had to do. At the same time, or late 90s, the European Commission was moving online. So we set up a website, europa.eu, which already in a few years grew to something, a huge site of 6 million pages of content. So this 60,000 pages of legislation, it was possible to translate with human translators. But with this website of 6 million pages, we realized that we cannot translate it anymore. Translating it to all the 24 languages that we now have the official languages, I have calculated that it would take, for the Commission translation service, it would take 100 years to translate. And by that time, of course, the content is no longer up to date. So it's a difficult task. We create something like 2, maybe 3 million pages new content every year, online content. And if you want to translate that into into the additional 23 languages, we would need, instead of our about 2,000 translators, we would need 40,000-50,000 translators just to translate the emerging new content. Why do we bother translating this? Can't we just say that we publish it in English and you just, that's it? We cannot do that, because one of the guiding principles from the beginning of the European Union, when it was created in the 1950s, was that multilingualism. It was actually already written in the founding treaties of the European Union back then, and it was later on recognized and confirmed several times that this is actually the only way to go, because people will otherwise not feel it as their own thing. citizens and companies, because there simply is no common language in Europe. There are less than 40% of the population speak English or any English, and even those who do, they are not comfortable enough to buy products online, for example, from the web, other than in their own language. So the single market that we are trying to create, so that's something that where we try to be a bit like the Americans. We want to create one single market in Europe. That's difficult. It was easier in the past when we were selling goods and services like car parts or furniture, and you went to a shop and you bought it, or it was sent with a truck over the borders. We had no borders back then. We had no customs duties. Now people are buying online. So you are immediately confronted with the language. You see the website. If it's the website is in Romanian and I don't understand the language, I will certainly not buy anything from that site. 80% of the e-commerce websites in Europe are in one language only. So how can we have a common market in this situation? No, people just buy in the web shops of their own country. So we went a step backwards in this process of creating a single market. So what can we try to do to help this situation? So our team, our group is looking at language technologies and machine translation, for example. The European Union has tried out machine translation a long time ago. There was a project called Eurotra, which started already in late 70s and ran the whole 80s and until the early 90s. It was a failure. It didn't work out at all. It was for many reasons. Maybe the technology was very shaky at that time. It's also that we took the wrong approach. We thought that we will create a machine that will replace the human. We will program it so that it will be like a human, and then that's it. That was the wrong assumption. So we tried something different recently. We adopted a different technology, which is based on a system that learns from people, learns from humans. So it learns from translators. It is called the statistical machine translation paradigm, and we have been successfully now implementing a system. It's called the MT@EC system, which now translates between all the 24 official EU languages, and we have been adding new languages like Norwegian has been added, because we work a lot with Norway, although they are not a member of the EU. And it has proven very promising. And the way it works is that the system, we feed the system with texts and their translations, good quality human translations. And the system learns to translate from that. It's a bit like a translation memory system, but where a translation memory only translates the sentences that it has seen before, this statistical machine translation can actually recompose sentences and create sentences, translation for sentences that it has never seen before. So obviously we need these translations, and we need them for all the languages. That's the problem that we now have. So if we want to have a translation system between Finnish and French, we would need texts in those languages, Finnish and French, which are translations of each other. Of course, that is very difficult, almost impossible for some languages. So what we are now looking, we are in a hunt for language resources. We would call it also language data. And that is a very difficult that's a very difficult hunt, because language resources are typically scattered all over the world. So on the web you can find something, but most of the most interesting and good quality resources are not accessible. They are private, proprietary. They are on the servers of the translation companies or the clients or the freelancers. And for obvious reasons, people don't want to share their precious material. There are some open source repositories like there is my memory, for example, and the father of my memory is here with us, and I will tell you later who he is. And there is the Opus database, which contains a lot of open translations of subtitles, for example. But it's not enough. So we have created a project running a roadshow in all the EU countries, trying to help us with this hunt after the language resources. We need more data. And what is more, we want also to create a market for language data, for language resources. Because we don't believe that it all has to be free of charge. It cannot be free of charge. If it has been created with a lot of trouble and effort and investment, there must be a fair price to pay for that. In my presentation in the webinar 2015, in the UTIC webinar, I outlined something of a system that can, system and technology that can help to create a market for very scattered and fragmented language data that is all over the world in different places. Now, the point I made there is that we have technologies, we have already developed technologies that make it possible actually to share fragments of data, and to that the author would actually receive a payment every time somebody uses that segment. So you can sell your translation not once or twice, you can sell it 1,000, 3,000, 1 million times. And then the unit price can go very low, because one of the things that have been blocking the emergence of a market for language resources is that where these private or good quality language resources are available, they are terribly expensive, and nobody wants to pay that price. It's too much of a risk. So when we have a functioning market, the volumes will be big, and then also the unit price will be lower. Now, if we manage to have access to good quality language data for all languages, we can automate more. But what is important in the new paradigm of automated translation, I try to avoid using the word machine translation, is that there is place for the humans, for the experts and for the linguists in that construct. And this is one thing that has also emerged during our road shows in the European countries, all the EU countries, that because in the audience we often have, most of the audience is translators, interpreters, and they are asking, they are worried about their future. What will happen to us? Isn't all this that you are creating and building, isn't it going to take our jobs? And I think 20 years or 15 years ago, the story would have been that, yes, it will take, probably it will take your jobs, you are right. But today this is no longer true. I start with interpreters because I like them very much, and I appreciate that profession because I'm totally unable to do it myself. We hosted Europe in 1995 in Luxembourg, the Machine Translation Summit. It was held in the session hall of the European Parliament, the second one, which is located in Luxembourg. And there was a presentation or live demonstration of a system of automatic interpreting system called Verb Mobile. And it was an impressive piece of hardware as well. So when the presenter brought the machine to the room, it was on a cart on wheels, must have weighed 100 kilos. And then he took the microphone and spoke a sentence in German, clearly pronounced German, and the machine worked it out for 10 or 15 seconds, and then of the loudspeakers out came the English sentence, perfectly formulated English sentence. And at that point, because we had interpretation in that event, the interpreters who were sitting at the top of the auditorium in their booths, they started to lean towards the window of their booth and looking at this machine that is going to take their jobs and make them all redundant. And they looked very worried. Now this happened 1995, so 21 years ago, this machine has not made a single one redundant. All the interpreters still have their jobs. Same goes for translators. We are using this empty at easy translation, machine translation system already to translate documents and online content. So not only legislative or administrative document, but also the content, the live content on our websites. So it's not yet translating the europa.eu website completely, so you will not yet find that in all languages, but that's on the agenda as well. But nevertheless, we are translating 12 million pages a year with that automated translation system. We still have our translators, and we need more of them. I mean, they have their hands full of work. And it's just that many of them have actually specialized into different areas, and that there are new professions that are emerging. When I joined the Commission, I worked in the beginning also as a translator and then as a terminologist. It was a very strictly regulated job description where you had 15 terminologists, and then you had a large number of translators, and then you had revisers that were revising the translations of others. Nowadays, we have people, linguists with training of translator or interpreter, who are managing corpora of text, who are organizing the text to be fed to the machine translation system, to teach, to train the systems. We have people who are annotating, who are marking every word, what it means, what is its grammatical role in the sentence, and in a way they are telling the computer actually what the sentence means, what the language means. So annotator. We have people who are managing concept structures, sort of glossaries with sub-concepts and top concepts and definitions. They are called lexicologists or ontologists or taxonomists. We have fancy new nominations for jobs that are actually very diverse, very interesting, but they are usually all done by linguists, by people who used to do translations. So that's something that has clearly emerged and is going to happen in the future, that there is a more diversification of the job of the translator. And one more thing is becoming evident, where we are not very good, but we are learning, is crowdsourcing. For example, if we look at our europa.eu website, why don't we just give a task or a challenge to people in all the member states that why don't you translate the pages of the Europa.eu that you feel are important for your citizens, and do it as voluntary work. But of course, crowdsourcers, especially if you ask them to work for free, they have to believe in the cause. I mean, they have to be enthusiastic about it, and that's the difficult thing about crowdsourcing. We have not been yet very active or successful in doing that. What is important to understand, and this is my thesis, is that translation is an art, and that's why I'm glad to see here a whole art of translation, so one of the 3 tracks. But artists need tools. So, for example, when photography emerged in the 19th century, or when we look at the new tools like 3D printing, they are tools for artists. The artists can create fancier things with such tools, and the tools make the artists more powerful. The tools will not make them jobless. For example, Hans mentioned this post-editing work, which is very boring, and no translator wants to post-edit the output of machine translation. I can only agree when I've been talking with our translators, but it all depends on the tool. So we have developed in EU-funded projects technology for a smart translators workstation or tool, which actually makes the post-editing work progressively obsolete. So we have a project, we had a project called MateCat, which was a sort of combination of machine translation and translation memory system. It's a sort of machine translation system which never makes the same mistake again. Once you tell it to fix something, that same mistake does not appear again. It's learning on the fly. And I'm very glad that I managed to get the father of MateCat here, and Marco, can you stand up so that people see you? Marco and Daniele. So they came all the way from Rome. They are from the translation company. They came all the way from Rome here to tell about this technology, and they have their presentation tomorrow. So I can leave the technical details to them, but I just say that their system presents something of a new type of tool which is fun to use. So it's not one of those boring post-editors where you have to fix the same thing 300 times, but only once. Besides, this probably sounds too good to be true. It's a free open source system, so that you can start using it right now, and there is actually very user-friendly website for that tool. So that was what I would say about the work of translator in the future. Looks bright, in my opinion. I'm very optimistic. So if I summarize my predictions of what the translation landscape will be, there will be need for more collaboration. So that's something that is going to be a skill that is much in need, and I'm glad that Hans also mentioned this as in this skill set for translators. You have to be able to work together to be strong, and for that it's not only about crowdsourcing. It's because you have to be able to integrate the different parts of the workflow, from the authoring, from the editing to translation, the machine translation, using different systems, and then delivering the product, taking feedback from the users, feeding that into the process. Then you need, and we need together to try to create a market. Not only a market for translations, but for the product, for the raw material, for language technology, which is language resources. And this is a jump to the unknown. So it actually requires a lot of courage to do that, because people are sitting usually on their own resources and what they have created, rather than giving them away. So it's good to have that some people see that some people already have the courage, like the creator of my memory, which by the way is Marco as well, so that he created this collaborative translation memory, which is an open resource that anybody can access and use for any purpose. Then, of course, I agree that technology skills, as Hans said, technology is a part of the skill set of a translator, but I would say it's less and less and less so. We don't need all the linguists to be computer scientists anymore, because the tools are getting better and more powerful. So I think that's the part that is diminishing. It's going down. It's still good to have in your team somebody who is computer literate, even able to program. This is the other, and then yet another feature that I think will be very strong in the future is that there is more and more complex data about the text that are moving around. So if the fragments of text and even single sentences are moving around and they are a commodity that you can buy in micro transactions at very small prices, you need to know where that sentence comes from. Who translated it? Or was it maybe machine translated? And if it was it proofread afterwards by a linguist, by a domain expert? All this information must be embedded in that fragment of text. So it must be riding on that piece of data. It's called metadata. It's data about the data itself. This metadata is necessary to create a market for this kind of language resources, because it tells the buyer what the product is worth. And that's one of my theses, that we have to start to make this metadata part of all language data as well. So let's see if my predictions come true in the next UTIC conference. Maybe it's too early to at that point, but maybe in 5 years I'm willing to have a backward look if I did it right. But I'm pretty good in predicting. For example, I managed to predict more than 2 years ago that this UTIC conference would take place here in Dnipropetrovsk Oblast. And I have witnesses from the in-text translation company who can confirm this, that my prediction went right. But I didn't get everything right. I didn't guess that you would change the name of the city as well. So
half right.
I'm not perfect. So thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Kimmo.